Can you talk about speaking your shame?
It's so interesting you asking me because what I always say is I was ashamed of being mentally ill and I still am. I don't know if with complete truthfulness, I can say any longer that I still am, because I think saying it out loud over and over again and being open, a lot of that is gone. But for many years I was ashamed. I thought it was dirty. What does that say about me? I'm mentally ill. I'm broken.
That and so much more coming right up on today's episode of The Pod Spotter. You're listening to The Pod Spotter. I'm your host, Zack. There are a shitload of pods out there to weed through, guys. And that is why we are here. We're going to do the heavy lifting. We're going to find those little diamonds in the rough. And every Monday, we're going to talk to the creators and hosts of those pods. And we're going to play clips. And we hope you find it useful and entertaining. And we hope that you subscribe to our pod or visit us at thepodspotter.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at thepodspotter for extra content and information on upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Then like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's really a pleasure. I've been screening hundreds of podcasts. Surviving a 12-foot shark attack, getting blown up in Iraq, living through a deadly plane crash, escaping a cult, outrunning a blazing fire, getting run over by a 20-ton bus, and walking away from MS-13. Your summer blockbuster podcast is here, ladies and gentlemen. Real people, real stories of survival. This might just be the very best damn podcast that you're not listening to. Kimi Culp has 20 plus years of broadcast experience. That includes work as a producer for NBC, ABC, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. She's a mother, an author, a film producer. But today, she joins me to discuss All the Wiser, the podcast that brings you the most insane stories of people's darkest days, the realities of living through adversity, and lessons on life, loss, and love. Thank you, Kimi. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this wonderful podcast with us. It has been a true pleasure to binge. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And I'm going to hire you to do my promo at the top because, man, was that succinct. Way better than my elevator pitch. You can just hang out in elevators with me when they're a thing again. And
that's a win. This interview's over. I got a compliment from Kimi. We're done here. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap.
So I introduced you well because that is typically your first question on your podcast. How would you introduce yourself?
First and foremost, I'm a human being and I'm a wife and a mother and a friend. Yeah. I'm somebody who is innately curious about the world. I'm a flawed human being and I'm a deep thinker and occasionally funny. So yeah, and I love telling stories and finding stories about other people and sharing them, which is what led me to All the Wiser and talking to you today.
All the Wiser is often funny. I think that was one of the biggest surprises I had coming out of it. My wife and I have just been binging it and loving it and just laughing a lot through some of the darkness, which seems to be an important modality of survival and overcoming adversity. And I think that's what I really want to focus our time today on is that those modalities, the wisdom part of what you learned over the course of working on this podcast. But I do want to start at the beginning of the pod, at least, and how it came to be, if we can go back a year to when we were all younger and less trapped.
All the Wiser came to me during a rare period of quiet. I produced a film and traveled the world with a film festival, was very exhausted and sleep deprived and a little bit bloated and overweight. And I just said, I'm not going to do this again. I'm going to sit, I'm going to be present, I'm going to be available to myself and my kids. And instead of just jumping for the next thing, I'm going to wait to see what that next thing should be. And throughout the next and first 18 months of not working and just being, I really fell in love with podcast. And what I realized is that I had traveled the world as a journalist and producer interviewing people, but that my voice had in fact never been a part of that narrative. It was always edited out and shipped off to an anchor who would, wrap around the footage, if you will, in New York, or a film where the producers and filmmakers are behind the camera, so you don't hear our voices. And I thought, well, what if I could capture the conversation in its entirety and have some ownership and agency? Because you can have these really to what feels like special and personal connections, and then have them chopped up in a million pieces and have people throw sensational music over it, for television.
Was it a pretty seamless transition for you?
When you work in television and film, you have a budget for an audio engineer, you got a sound engineer and DP. I had no idea how to run any of this equipment I'm now wearing. So yeah, very little barriers of entry. Anyone can start a podcast, but learning the technical piece of it, now I'm starting to really think more deeply about my voice and training my voice, and so listeners can have a richer experience that's still kind of true to me. So yeah, it was about finding my voice. It was about finally getting the courage to say my voice is worth sharing, which took a long time. But at 43, I thought, okay, well, I won't let fear stop me from that. And I will include my voice, and I'll find stories that I believe have real value in sharing. And our stories are definitely dramatic and entertaining in nature. But the most important piece of the stories is really the end takeaway, and how people can be shaped and transformed through incredible adversity. And when they come out the other end with really, I would say, an evolved understanding of the world and themselves. Yeah. And the goal is that there's some, that it can be cathartic for both the interviewee or storyteller, if you want to call it that, and the people who are connecting. That was really the intention. And then I've always been obsessed with like Tom Shoes and Warby Parker and all these hipster companies who figure out like how to do their work, but like also make a good dent in the world. So we were lucky enough to partner with a foundation and say like, okay, well, let's play with that in the story space. Like let's meet at the intersection of story and cause. And so, yeah. And we started All the Wiser.
How do you receive submissions then for All the Wiser? Or how do you hear about stories? How do you choose which stories to produce?
It's an influx. I mean, it's using that training as a journalist, which is research. So a lot of times I think of something like, I'm fascinated about opioid addiction and what does that really look like? Or I'm really fascinated about mental health wards. What is, there's a huge history in our country there. Yeah. Or so sometimes it's driven by that. And then you go into research mode, like you would if you were a documentary filmmaker and you'd start looking for stories and people. Sometimes it's through guests. Sometimes it's through friends of friends.
Nice. And for All the Wiser, was the original working title I Dare You Not to Cry? Or was it always...
Zack, I like to call them stories of weight.
Stories of weight you're looking for. So weight, you're looking for change, you're looking for originality, and you're looking for topics of interest to you, topics that you'd like to explore and share.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of them have themes that go beyond what would be the obvious subject matter. My friend Michelle, whose husband has ALS and can't speak, and I mean, it's a very complex story, but Michelle's story is about what it means to be a caretaker. And
is this Gleason?
Gleason, yeah. What it can, and so a lot of people can relate to caretaking, whether that's kids or elderly parents, or so. So yeah, the stories. I'm glad you say you laugh, because I think that's important, and I think that most of our guests' levity is a part of their journey and their coping mechanism, and what has helped them get through their suffering or collective suffering. And so while our stories are of weight and parts of it feel, really heavy and high stakes, I think a lot of them have a lot of funny moments. And I think ultimately they are hopeful, but most importantly, they're real. I mean, so I think the weight thing, it's just like you go to a dinner party, you sit next to the person. How are you? Oh, everything's good. Da, 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 da. The kids are going to XYZ. And then it's like, if we all said how we really were, like, shit would get real. And so I'm interested in having those conversations about what's really going on in people's lives and how that we can share to connect more, support each other more, learn about different perspectives. So I would say they're weighty and they're real.
One of the first moments and that made me laugh out loud, Gleason was probably the first thing I listened to, just because there's such a big footprint about Gleason, given that you produced a film, been nominated for an Academy Award. And so it was one of the first ones I listened to. And one of the first times I laughed out loud was just at his sense of humor right off the bat. He starts with a joke about your name. And we'll just play a quick clip. This is from Gleason.
First off, I want to thank you for taking the time to interview me. I'll try not to stutter. I also love how I say Kimi. Kimi, Kimi, Kimi.
Kimi, Kimi, Kimi. Yeah. Speaking of somebody who can, in spite of not being able to speak, typing with his eyes, consistently make the whole room laugh out loud. So yeah, that's just a glimpse.
Yeah. I think in order just to have an open, honest conversation about the impact that your podcast has had on me personally, I think I should just share with you my sort of break glass in case of emergency moment that I'm living through right now personally with my wife, who was recently diagnosed with cancer a few months ago. And while we are very much in our infancy with our journey, I'm not really able to I can't talk about it the way that your guests talk about it with any great distance or perspective. I can just offer to share that it is an extremely important podcast, and the modalities of healing and recovery that you share are significant. And there's something in it for everybody that is not only dealing with something personally, but also, just might know somebody dealing with adversity, might know somebody going through their darkest time. And so I just kind of want to start with some clips of those modalities and maybe have you reflect on some of them that you've learned from people struggling with adversity. And the first one that I really was struck by was meditation. And let's hear what Victoria has to say about meditation.
Yeah, I pretty early on started developing seizures, and it got to a point at its height, they were every 2 to 5 minutes around the clock. And so a seizure feels like you're being struck by lightning. And so for a year and a half straight, I was pretty much being electrocuted for close to 20 hours a day, which is kind of a form of torture, if you will. And so that's actually how I learned how to meditate and how I learned how to kind of put myself elsewhere, because the pain was just pretty unbearable and I needed a coping method to go with it. And no one knew that I was in there. So people didn't realize that I was feeling every single shock going through my body, and they couldn't get it under control for a whole year and a half. But that was just another example of my body was just in this fight mode, and there was severe inflammation in my spinal cord and in my brain. So it was just like a thunderstorm.
If that isn't the best commercial for meditation, I don't know what is. She's trapped inside herself and she's experiencing seizures, and the only sort of respite she has is these moments of meditation.
Well, Zack, first of all, I want to go back and thank you for your trust and sharing with me about your wife. And I will be thinking of you both and praying for you both. And thank you for also sharing that our guests are offering some comfort and reprieve. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. I mean, you have put yourself in your own podcast as well. You're very open and honest. You spend an entire episode dealing with mental health. And so it felt disingenuous to come to you and talk to you about your podcast and not at least offer that same honesty.
Well, thank you. Victoria, who had locked-in syndrome, who was in a coma, and the world around her was not aware that she was awake, although her family rightfully and deeply believe she was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the meditation piece, and this goes back to, I don't know if you and your wife have had a chance to listen to Maya Moyles.
Of course.
Interesting point that most of our guests are on the other end of something. So they're looking back. It's a disservice and a misnomer to say that anybody comes out of anything and you wrap it up in a beautiful red bow and, oh, I learned so much and now I'm evolved and life moves forward. These things stay with us and they're a piece of us and a part of us. But there is this whole notion of post-traumatic growth that you can go through these things and come out with new wisdom and new gifts and new perspective. And you've been through something hard, which can ultimately be of service when you share it with others. And Maya was, diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at the age of 27 and is still in the thick of it. And she said, I don't know that I can do this, Kimi, because I'm not on the other end of anything. I'm in the thick of it. And I said, Maya, you still have a lot to teach us. And Maya talks a lot about meditation. And then our another guest, Damien Eccles, who was in solitary confinement from being wrongfully confused. All three of those people in incredibly stressful situations all turn to and cite meditation as a modality that saved their lives in a sense in different ways. So I do think the ability to use that as the most beautiful, healthy coping mechanism that exists. The fact that it's been, practiced around the world, for, gazillions of years at this point. And that I think that the level of calm and presence, so you can show up for these things that are really hard. So the act of meditation itself, but more importantly, the ripple effect that it has, well beyond the actual, time of practice.
Maya also had that imagery of the ocean, which we
Yes.
identified with, and the waves of her journey and her battle. Just getting her mind right for the next wave that's coming, and respecting the ocean and respecting that. You're sitting in a time of tumult sometimes, and then there's the calm, and then another wave crashes, and you sort of just have to have your mindset in the right place to survive the unpredictability of the ocean.
Yeah.
It's beautiful stuff.
I've been in the OR twice. I've had 15 rounds of chemo, and I've been in ERs countless times with complications over the past 15 months. So it's been a roller coaster. I think most people who see me don't even think I'm sick, and I can manage to live a very normal life. But then every time I'm kind of feeling like I calibrate back to normal, something weird will happen and I'll have another complication. So it's a very humbling journey. I feel like it's kind of like learning to surf. And every time you think you've got it or don't have enough respect for the ocean, it will smack you with another wave. So just learning to ride all of that.
I just feel like this is such a gift having you here, and I have you trapped in this Zoom, and I have so much to learn from you, an expert on, overcoming adversity, that I just want to mine you for all of these little modality nuggets that you can share.
Thank you, Zack. I think people matter most. There isn't one single interview where people didn't talk about the relationships in their life. It wasn't always their parents. A lot of times it was. A lot of people, referenced, their mothers. But I think, ultimately in the end, how we love and how we were loved is how, is what our time here is about.
Yeah.
So I think those relationships and to the point, where you're in this journey with your wife, kind of how it all of a sudden what matters most comes in to play, right?
Sure.
So a lot of these people, some had, really big careers that, kind of came with, in hindsight, a big ego, and they came back and were like, everything changed, right? No. Like, why am I actually doing this? What is it? What does this work mean? How do my employees feel when they show up for the world? Do I have time to, call my, do I have time to meet somebody who, so I think, relationships matter most. Surrounding yourself with the people who love and support you unconditionally, matters the most. And that is a theme that has not been missed from one single interview. Aaron Stark was, a day away from being a school shooter. He had a family. I mean, it's, talk about neglect and abuse and just awful. And, he says kind of the thing that saved him was this one kid at school who found out it was his birthday and invited him over, and he walks in and there's a birthday cake and people acknowledging that he matters.
Right.
Like that ultimately act of kindness potentially saved 30 people and is one less mass school shooting. So it all comes back to people,
I want to hear a little bit from Matt Paulson on this topic of staying connected and staying with people and the people around you helping you survive. This is Matt Paulson, who had flatlined far longer than any human should and statistically was given 0% chance to live. The clip is a little long, but I think it's probably the most incredible from your entire podcast, just about the importance of staying connected and the people around you helping you through these dark times. Let's listen to Matt.
If you've ever been scuba diving or snorkeling or watched an underwater movie and you're deep underwater and you're looking up at the surface of the ocean and you can see just a little bit of light coming through, it was like that, but the light felt like just impossibly far away, like a universe of time away. And the water was this like cosmic energy water where, like they talk about in Buddhism, where you're both a drop in the ocean and the entire ocean, or when you become nothing, you become everything. It was like that. I was myself, like not in my body, but I was myself, but I also felt connected to everything else. And I could hear my mom saying, Matthew David Paulson, you got to fight. You got to fight. These people are fighting to save your life. And I could hear that. And I remember thinking like, wow, I've got a long way to go, but I just remember fighting with my spirit and also feeling that the energy around me was collaborating with me, that the people that were right outside the room sending in the energy, my friends knew about what was going on. So they were holding prayer circles. My girlfriend Anna's family had prayer circles going in Argentina. And I just believe the collection of those intentions, I could feel it. And I remember just fighting and fighting and fighting. And just like, it felt like an infinitely long journey. And then I remember the moment of just like bursting back into the world and feeling that feeling of like, oh my gosh, the journey, I'm here, I'm back. And looking at my mom and looking at my dad. And then there's just like this moment of pure joy where I felt connected to everything in the world all at once.
That clip kind of takes my breath away. I'm sorry.
He's like a poet. I mean,
so beautiful. Oh my gosh.
He is a poet.
The connections that he felt while he was in that sunken place brought him back. It's wild to think about.
Yeah.
And that's somebody who was, that he was on the other side.
Yeah.
It's an incredible piece of audio that you have there. And I got to just say, from our own experience here, from the time we received our diagnosis, just very isolating. We're in the time of COVID, getting this news. It's breast cancer. It's inflammatory breast cancer. It's metastatic inflammatory breast cancer. It's triple negative. Just this sort of avalanche of bad. And, you have to live with that for a little while. And then it was our decision to, speak about it publicly, post on Facebook. And the minute she hit send on her post and the minute we started to feel that connection from the people around us, that for me is when it felt like the healing truly began. That for me is when we were like, okay, we're not alone in this thing, and we got a chance. We got a shot. And just hearing Matt's story brought all of that, just really solidified that modality of just not isolating yourself in whatever you're going through, not closing off the world. You have another, one of your guests that talks about, the way forward is through.
Yeah.
The way forward is through. That was his mantra. That's the same guy, is that right? The potential school shooter who almost was a school shooter. And the way of dealing with it was the way forward is through the thing. Talk about the thing, be open about the thing. Yeah. So along those lines of the way being forward is through is another modality that I discovered, another common thread of speaking one's shame. Can you talk about speaking your shame?
Yeah. So you referenced it earlier. I have bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed at the age of 18. I hid it until last summer when I flipped the microphone and I had a friend interview me about living with bipolar disorder and the reasons that I hid it for so long. So the reasons I hid it are, it's so interesting you asking me, because what I always say is I was ashamed of being mentally ill and I still am. I don't know if with complete truthfulness, I can say any longer that I still am, because I think saying it out loud over and over again and being open, a lot of that is gone. But for many years, I was ashamed. I thought it was dirty. What does that say about me? I'm mentally ill. I'm broken. I have this glossy life on the outside, but if people really knew. And, bipolar disorder, at times it feels like a jolt of adrenaline. And largely how it manifested in me was, I didn't need very much sleep. I had a loss of appetite. I had really big ideas and creative thinking. I was go, go, go. Oddly, all things that are rewarded in society, especially in television and film, everyone's like, oh, you look great. You've lost 10 pounds. You're crushing it. How many places have you flown to? Great ideas. And I'm like, thanks. Like, I'm going fucking crazy. And so it's weird because there's a excitement, a confidence, a creativity that's rewarded and also feels kind of good, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But on the other end of that is the crash, which is very dark and painful and scary and lonely, and a lot of, what people know as depression, crying and withdrawing. So I've been really lucky to have people in my life from very early on that helped me manage it, and great doctors with medication, and learning lots of things about just being self-aware when, wow, I feel like I'm talking fast, and I've been waking up with, all these brainstorming ideas at 4 a.m. So I understand the chemistry of my brain and how that shows up in the world. And you can take medications and slow down, or, even like just change diet things. Like, okay, I'm cutting out caffeine and sugar and alcohol for a month. Something's going on with me, So yeah, it was something that I decided. It felt disingenuous. I was asking a lot of people to talk about really hard things, some that are deeply personal. And I have my own deeply personal thing that to me at times has been my private suffering. So I thought that I would meet my guests where they were, which is brave enough to talk about hard things and stand in their truth.
What were some of the feedback, or what have you heard from people or from fans of the pod since going public in episode 10? For anybody just jumping into all the wiser, and one good place to start, Kimi's episode is episode 10.
I kid you not. I mean, before COVID, when you could communicate at a grocery store, literally one guy we know each other, pleasantry. He's like, and he stops me and he just said, I was looking for your email last night. I just want to thank you. And he's just said, I was living in New York in my 30s, and, I would come home every night and cry for hours. At points, I was suicidal. And just literally
right there in Trader Joe's, just unloaded. Yeah.
Just fully unloaded. And so now the connection I have with him compared to the 10 years that I would see him in town once a month that's a completely different human connection.
Wow.
There's no comparison, right? And the respect that we both have for one and each other, not based on my perception of his outer shell, now understanding what a beautiful, complex, real human being he is. And the same, friends reaching out saying, well, we haven't told anyone, but, my daughter's been pulling out all of her hair, and we're thinking about outpatient treatment. Would you, talk to her? That wasn't my reality, but, I want to show her that you can come out of these things. And so my shame led me to hide, which meant being quiet and at times I'm not going to call myself fake, but faking that everything was perfect. And what that actually did was robbed me of the ability to be of service to others. So that mom didn't know that she had somebody 2 blocks away that she could call. That, businessman in the suit didn't know that he saw somebody in the grocery store he could say, that happened to me too. And it makes me feel better to know. So my letting go of the fear and my own selfish belief that everyone's going to think about me. Well, first of all, no one's going to think about me because everyone's worried about themselves, not me or my mental health. And so it opened connectedness. It opened new relationships. It opened respect, and it liberated me to just being this is part of who I am, and warts and all. And I've learned to, I said I learned to live with it. I learned to dance with it, to wrestle with it, all of the above.
Let's listen to a clip from episode 10 when Kimi first spoke her shame to, is it Graham? Am I remembering that correctly?
That's my husband, yeah.
Let's listen to Kimi.
But you have shared this with some other people in the past, carefully chosen. And what has been the experience of that?
The best one was with Graham. I think it was about a year in, and I was terrified. And I remember being really nervous, and my hands were shaking. I was crying, and I thought, well, he knows I'm mentally ill. I don't know. Maybe he'll go away. And so I tell him, and I work up the court. And his answer was, "You're way less crazy than my last girlfriend."
So that's reassuring.
We love Graham. That's so cute. But that's right. The minute, you talk about, you name a thing and you talk about it publicly, you do find that everybody kind of comes out of the woodwork and they're like, hey, I have this. I also have this. It's not the same, but that's the thing we constantly hear. It's not the same, but, and it's there's no real use in making comparisons between your suffering and mine. We're all going through something, and we all can learn from each other in some way. I generally feel like whatever you're bringing to me, I can learn something from it. If you've either been through some shit or you haven't, is what it seems. And if you have, I'll take it. I'll take whatever you can bring, because
I think, Zack, that's so important that you say that, because some people have said to me oh, well, I listened and now I realize, somebody's story who's something that feels really extreme, and often because it is, but I realized I shouldn't be upset about X, Y, Z, or, I'm not going to take this for granted. And I always say that I don't think that's the point. To you, exactly what you said, suffering is a shared human experience. So regardless of what your suffering it is, it's real. I think this idea that, well, I shouldn't, be feeling this way because in comparison isn't how we're all going to collectively support one another and showing up in the best ways that we can for one another.
Maybe the smartest thing I heard probably came from one of your youngest guests. And that was a little something that I heard from Trey, who was part of your A Little Wiser series. In addition to the larger sort of big form podcasts, you started these Little Wiser, smaller podcasts, and you interviewed Trey. And he has his own podcast, and he talked about being thankful. Let's listen to Trey talking about being thankful.
My greatest takeaway is be thankful for who you have to help you. I would be in a much different situation than now if I had no one to help me. So always be thankful for who you have to help.
Simple, but so freaking profound and so stinking wise. And something that me as a dumb guy, hearing about the situation that I was going to be embarking upon, my initial response is hunker down. How do I do this? How do I, got to get the diet right, got to get the thing, got to do all the things. And it's no. Let's stop and be thankful that my wife has acquired all of these beautiful people in our lives to help us. And if they want to set up a meal chain, take the meal train. If they want to, send candles, take the candles, take it all, and just be thankful for the people that you have around you. So, so, so important. And I'm so thankful for Trey for underlining that. And Trey links to another guest, Matt Long, on your show. And this might be a good time to talk about the one-for-one nature of your podcast, because All the Wiser is, in addition to helping people with empathy and perspective, they also have a bit of a giving back component to it. Can you talk about the 1 for 1 of All the Wiser?
Yeah, the idea was, 50 episodes. We said, stood up in a backyard, say the statement in front of people, then you've got to be held accountable. We said the goal is 50 inspiring stories, $100,000 given away to charities around the world. And that for each story, that individual could pay it forward, not only share their story and their gift with the listeners, but be able to make a contribution to a charity they believe in.
Well, I mentioned Matt Long, who helped set up Trey with his storytelling through his foundation. And so it might be a good time to mention Matt Long's modality and what I learned from Matt in terms of just setting goals. That seems to be another big one that we hear a lot. Set a goal. Let's hear Matt.
And my whole outlook on life had changed.
How had it changed?
Quite frankly, I'd stopped dreaming. Even though I dreamed when I was a kid to play basketball, I realized that when I'm happiest, I'm dreaming of the next best thing, whether it's an athletic event, whether it's a challenge, whether it's my social life, whether it's getting married, have kids. I was always dreaming about that next best thing and striving to make that happen. And that made me happy. After September 11th, I had stopped looking forward to the future. Like time had stopped. And I became depressed. I became a little more grouchy, short with people, got overweight. Like I said, wasn't even happy going to work anymore. And I needed that to change.
We ran up against this with our own diagnosis. I was like, we received the news right around the time we were starting this podcast. And I was like, well, the pod's done. I'm not doing that. I can't be focusing on other things. And my wife was just like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, I need to, be more attentive to you, toward new child. And she's like, no. We don't, it doesn't stop. Nothing stops. We're not stopping anything. You still want to do this. You're passionate about it. We have to keep living our lives. We have to keep going. We have to keep hoping. We have to keep doing. Otherwise, then it just wins. Then the thing wins. Whatever the thing is, defeats you there on the spot if you stop. And I just really heard that when Matt talks about the next thing always kind of propelling him forward. I feel like throughout my life, even, pre-cancer diagnosis, it's been generally hope of another thing coming that has kept me motivated and kept me going.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It's totally fair. And your wife sounds incredible. And the fact that she had that insight and that, that insight and that gift to you. And to me, that feels very, very right. I get that. So I'm glad that she inspired you to do that.
She's the stronger of the two, for sure.
I do think it goes back to, is Aaron, is it Aaron talking about, the only way
forward is through.
The only way forward is through it. I think that's very much the case, is that there is no growth. You have to sit in it.
Let's hear that. Let's hear that clip of acknowledgement. This is Aaron's modality of acknowledgement of the thing.
The biggest step that I personally took was acknowledgement, where I went through the people that hurt me over the years and confronted them, not in an accusatory way, not to say that you did this so you need to pay, or you did this and you hurt me so you need to suffer, but just to acknowledge, be like, I know this is what happened. This is the reality that I'm living in, and our relationship is fundamentally altered forever because of it. And that process for myself was so cathartic, and so it allowed me to release so many of those demons that it made me believe in one of my core personal philosophies, which is the way out is through. The best way to get through something is to just get through it. And sometimes it's going to hurt a lot to go through it, but it's much better to go through it than go around it.
Yeah, I love that.
Awesome. Pretty awesome.
And I do think there was a consistent method or a message of, it's like acknowledging it, sitting in it, allowing it to be what it is, like you said, letting in the support and the love. But there was never really nobody had this song. at moments, why me? But they never let the victimization narrative drive the bus for very long. At some point, it wasn't about that.
Don't become your thing. Don't become your disease. They don't
correct.
allow them. And that's really why I kind of want to tackle your pod like this. I didn't want to sort of be reductive and just reduce them to their moment of tragedy, because really the pod is the wisdom that they glean. Yes. The 45 minutes is the conversation. That's the beauty. So I could have sat here and played clips of, someone punching a shark and someone jumping on, and it just seemed disingenuous.
Yep.
That this is the meat of it. This is the heart of it. And you get some real just profound ideas of overcoming adversity that I haven't heard articulated anywhere else. And that's another great one from Aaron Stark, not the guy who almost was a school shooter, as I referred to him earlier. I apologize for talking about them like their worst days. I meant to just try to remember everyone's name. Okay, let's take a quick break here. We'll be right back. We're here to fill the role of looking for great content for you. If you like the show, please check us out and subscribe. Visit thepodspotter.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at thepodspotter. We might be on TikTok. I'm not sure. It's all out there for lots of good stuff. But please leave a review, subscribe, rate, judge us on Apple Podcasts, and help spread the word. We release every Monday with a great new review of a wonderful new podcast, and we're just going to keep plowing ahead, whether you're here or not. It's going to be happening. So please be here, so I'm not just talking alone. And if you have suggestions for pods to feature, drop us a note on any of those social media platforms or thepodspotter.com. Thanks, everybody. I have invented a term, I think, though, with binging this pod. I had to do a bit of a pod palate cleanser in between each one. I'd have to do a Kimi and then do a pod palate cleanser and go to something just dumb fluff. Do you have any of those? Do you have any just dumb, or can you generally just live in the weight all the time? What's your pod palate cleanser these days?
Pod palate cleanser. Oh, that's such a good one. I mean, you know what was so good back in the day was the Richard Simmons one. What's it called?
Oh, yeah. Searching for Richard Simmons, for finding Richard Simmons?
Thank you. Yeah. So finding, I should have the name.
And it turned out he was just like, hey, peace. I was here all along. Everything's fine.
But it was so good.
It was
so
good.
Good, right?
It was very good. Is this fun for you? Is this okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
To keep doing this?
Yeah.
You okay? Okay.
I'm okay.
I've identified a few more and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
Don't live in fear, says David Bird in episode 13. Let's listen to David's perspective about just continue to live.
I'm a numbers guy. And so when I had these couple of months of not doing anything in the apartment, I was doing a lot of research on what the probability of a shark attack was. And I concluded that if I was going to be afraid of being attacked by a shark again, I needed to be afraid of pretty much everything else in my life. And so I decided not to do that. And so one example is last year, there were 66 people in the world who were attacked by a shark, what they call unprovoked shark attacks. And there were 70 something people who died while taking a selfie. So if I'm going to be afraid of shark attacks, I can't take selfies, right? There's an extreme, there's a really extreme level and extreme unlikelihood that I don't fear it, because then I'd have to fear everything else. Way more likely things are dying in a car accident or an airplane, or even being struck by lightning is 4 times more likely. So I don't want to live my life in fear of everything. So therefore I can't live my life in fear of a shark attack.
I don't fear selfies. I can't fear the shark. I gotta get
I've always been totally fascinated about the selfie deaths. Not to make light of selfie deaths, but it's
Have you been to the Grand Canyon? I totally get it. I get it. You're just caught up in the vastness. The altitude's messing with your head. You're just getting close, trying to get that perfect shot. Thinking about the likes. I gotta get the likes. And then you're gonna ravine, and they're sending donkeys down after you.
David Bird.
Holy Hannah, that guy. Yeah. Incredible.
He's 27. He's significantly more mature and evolved than I am. Everything. I got off the phone and I'm like, where did this kid come from?
Yeah.
His level, it's a sense of self, it's maturity, it's gratitude, it's, just, and you get that it happened before the shark attack. I mean, it's not just this happened to me and now I'm, he is just, I mean, I think some people come out beyond their years, and I was just blown away by him, blown away.
He's episode 13 if you want to start there, folks. It is also
really good. And people loved that one. There was
so good.
A big response.
Well, he also has that thing. It's like, I can choose to think about myself as very unlucky, or I can choose to think of myself as extremely lucky. Like, I can choose to be like, man, that was unlucky that I got attacked by a shark. Or I can be like, I survived a shark attack. I'm the luckiest human alive. I have to keep living. And like, it's a really good...
That one went like viral with, I mean, I'm saying viral, I'm talking about under 10 people. Viral with like the 12-year-old boy crowd.
Well, he punches a shark, Kimmy. He punches a shark in its shark mouth. That's 10-year-old boy porn right there.
So
I'll dream of that.
My friend was listening to it and she was carpooling some kids to baseball. And I kept running into kids like in town. They're like, man, Mrs. Culp, I listened to that David Byrd episode, and then like some kid with them I didn't know was like, oh, that was you? Yeah, that was great. My brother and I listened. It's like all these little dudes listening to all the wiser David Byrd. But there's like so many boys listen to that podcast. I'm like, I didn't even know kids listen to this thing.
How about Stay Positive? This one, to me, even before dealing with my own adversity, always felt just a little disingenuous, or a little annoying. What is it? Just walk around with a smile on my face all the time, or like,
it's an annoying one.
It's inactive, is what it is.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. I need specifics, and so I think Dan Brodsky in episode 31 sort of talks about staying positive in a more practical way. Let's listen to Dan.
I don't know that there was as big a change as there was confirmation of what I was doing. And when you have something in your life that you're this passionate about, and you're that driven to excel, and you're pushing yourself to become better at it every day, and the better you become, the more that you love it. And you've got a team that you just love doing this with, and it's a challenge together. And you've had the opportunity to do that. Once you've experienced that, you don't want to settle for anything else. And when I realized, as badly as I was hurt, I still think I can do this, then there was no question as to what it was going to be. And if I couldn't do that, I would have tried to find something else that I was that passionate about, because life is so fulfilling and has so much meaning and reward when you're doing those kinds of things, that you don't want to settle for a life that's less.
What was your wife's advice? Yeah. Were you guys, are you going to stop pursuing your passions? Are you going to stop living and growing in the ways that you do with your professional passions? Because they can, fill you up in a real meaningful way, I think.
I think the saying should go from stay positive to stay passionate, because Dan went through a pretty serious crash there, right? Is that what?
Yeah. So he survived a plane crash where, more than half of those on the flight lost their lives, and was a competitive skydiver, told he should never skydive again, and was back in a plane jumping, within months of leaving the hospital safely, found a new way. But what he speaks to is he went back to his passion, and had he not truly been able to go, he would have found something that lit him up as much as skydiving did, because that passion piece was so integral to him having a full life. And after the accident, he needed that more than ever.
Did doctors, refresh my memory, were they like, you can't do it? I remember there was one doctor that was like, no, there's no skydiving anymore after this. This is not going to happen.
So I think it was another theme in all of this is like how careful doctors need to choose their words, because you hear many people say doctors told them, you're never going to walk again. There's no hope. And another doctor comes in and says, I believe in you. We'll find a way. We'll find a. And so there was a lot of that. It was really interesting. Yeah.
Kimmy, should we complete this interview and you immediately get a call about some other life tragedy about to befall Kimi Culp? I hope it doesn't happen. But should that happen, Is there a first phone call to one of your, which one of your guests, I guess, do you call first for that sort of rewiring and that sort of game planning for the next chapter of your life? Who would you call on?
Oh,
you can only call
Zack,
one. I know.
Zack, you are good. You are good. You're Barbara Walters. You're much younger.
I'll take it.
And a man. I would say, Maya would be for sure. Stacey Lannert, I was really impressed by her. I mean, her story is crazy, and she's a really rad person.
What's Stacey's story again?
She grew up abused by her father from the time she was like 4 and actually ended up taking his life and then was sent to prison. She was sexually abused by her father and then was sent to prison as a teenager. And then they exonerated her. She came out, graduated number 2 in her class of law school and is now a public defender. I think BJ Miller is like so fascinating and like, if there's ever an end of life thing that I'm dealing with for anyone that I know, that's good, that I'm going to track him down and stalk him. So yeah, I mean, there's so many great ones, but Maya came to my heart first.
For sure. And you're walking with her next week too. So you had to say Maya.
Yeah,
She would have been upset.
That would have been awkward. Yeah.
Do you have a nickname for your fans? Do they call themselves anything? It's always the telltale sign of a good podcast, of a popular podcast, and yours certainly has the subscribers for it. Do they refer to themselves as anything?
We should put that out. I mean, I would really feel like I was, on track if I had like, Can
I workshop a couple?
Yeah.
Can I throw some at you? Okay.
Yep,
if you don't have any.
Yes. No, I don't. I mean, it's all starting now. Yeah.
Okay. There's Kimmy's Kids. It's not great. It's not great.
Not good.
Wise Guys, but that's a little gendered. Wise Guys liked. Okay. My number 1 though, I think I'm going with Culpables.
I think we may have a winner.
I think we might have something here. Culpables.
Yeah.
Fans of, I don't know. We'll see. We do a little thing here at the Pod Spotter.
I know.
Called Go Ahead as No One Is Listening. We do Go Ahead and no One Is Listening. It's a moment where you can share a secret or tell someone off or tell off a boss or just whatever, to recite some poetry. Do whatever you want. But Kimmy, I do that because it's based on the idea that no one listens to the last 5 minutes of podcasts. Yes. That everyone is already gone and they've finished their Blue Apron and their jog and they're not listening anymore. So you can do whatever you want. However, I listened to every one of your episodes start to finish. So you blew that theory out of the water. So we're not going to do that today.
Okay.
You've ruined a segment on our show.
Okay.
And so you know what I'm going to do. You know what segment I'm going to do.
I know. That's what I said. I know what you're going to do. Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Rapid fire.
Oh, baby. Let's do a little rapid fire. If you're a fan of all the
I was going to talk about my unibrow and my grooming habits, but
I love that. See, I just love talking to you, so I'm going to do that anyway. At the end of this, we'll do a little moment of Go Ahead, no one is listening.
No, that's fine. I don't know why I just inserted myself back into that horrible.
Because you're a host. You're a podcast host. That's what you do. This is Rapid Fire with Kimi Culp. Are you ready?
Ready.
All-time favorite podcast. Can't say Richard Simmons.
Whew.
Don't say the Pod Spotter because it's just going to be awkward because I know you're lying because you haven't.
That's better. All-time favorite podcast. I love a podcast called The Feel Good Effect.
Worst way to die?
Trapped anywhere. I'm trapped in a box, buried alive underground.
Best TV show of all time?
Narcos.
All the Wiser will be a success when?
All the Wiser will be a success when it feels whole and complete.
Favorite teacher growing up?
Miss Allard, for sure.
I can't stand people who?
Deeply lack self-awareness.
If I could relive one childhood memory, it would be?
Oh, that's a good one. If I could relive. I remember being at the boardwalk at Rehoboth Beach, like I don't know, just feels nostalgic. Lots of like taffy and cheap rides.
Mine was also on a boardwalk in New Jersey. Wow. What is it about that?
I don't know.
The whimsy. It must be the whimsy and
Yeah.
the family and the beach.
Yeah.
The worst part about living in LA is
lack of forehead expressions.
which leads perfectly to your eyebrow grooming, because no one is listening. Kimmy.
Well, I mean, it's much better. I could post some pictures from high school before I understood that like waxing was an option. But yeah, it's just this light skin, dark hair combo, and it just requires a lot of work that sometimes is not available during a global pandemic. So yeah, I mean, if I wasn't on top of it, it would look like there was like a Sharpie kind of situation.
Wow. So you're in it. I mean,
it's
struggling.
not that bad. I'm being a little bit dramatic, but yes, it's like to be tended to.
It looks great, by the way. No one here would notice. No one watching this would notice. My haircut is, I describe it as like, like Whisper Down the Alley. It starts out like with a good sentence and then that sentence gets morphed. I'm still cutting my own hair. Mm-hmm. So it's like started as a good haircut, but like slowly each time I do it, it's getting, I can't even show you the business back here. Thank God for we're doing fine.
I do have a moment just to let it go so I can release it into the world. When I was a desk assistant at NBC News in Washington, the tape intake guy, when we used to record tapes for nightly news, was frustrated at me and threw a beta tape at my head while I was logging, and it hit me in the eye. His name was Jim, so I would like to just vent and ask him for an apology.
There's so much to unpack here. First of all, Jim's not listening. No one is listening. He's never going to hear this. No one is ever going to hear this. Jim, with the beta tape, bro, threw it at your head. Why did he think that was an acceptable move?
Jim had anger management issues.
He was known. He was a known offender of throwing things. So you were kind of stirring the hornet's nest a little bit here with this.
Yeah, I can't even remember, but there was a beta tape thrown at my head by Jim that he worked in a basement with no natural light in the tape library, so I get it. But yes, he threw a beta tape at my head. That's an accurate story.
Really brutal, Jim. I hope you are listening, and I hope you apologize. You're a strong-willed person. I kind of feel like you went in there. You were wet. Yeah. You're fine. I'm going to use my moment of no one listening to see if someone is listening. My brother-in-law, Alan, says that he's been listening, and I sneaky believe that he just listens to like a couple like choice moments, and then is like, hey, that was really interesting, that thing, and then this other thing. So I'm going to use mine to give a password to Alan. And if you text me this, then I'll know that you're actually listening. This is how bad my ego is. I want to know that everyone that says they're listening is listening. Yeah. And the password is it's culpables. Text me culpables if you're really listening, you lying son of a. I mean, that's all the time we have for Hotspotter. This is a true pleasure.
All right, it's a pleasure. And I'm going to be thinking of you and your wife and your family.
Thank you. And I'll be listening for more modalities of healing and recovery because it's important.
All right. Thank you, Zack.
Thank you. Guys, subscribe, like, do all the things you do to podcasts, leave reviews, all that stuff, all the wiser. Go give it a listen. This has been the Pod Spotter, where we showcase the pods that we think you should know about. But if you have one that you think that we should know about, please let us know via thepodspotter.com or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at thepodspotter, or make a little TikTok video and send it to me, and we'll get it out there. Thanks, everybody. This has been Zack Robidas. The Pod Spotter is created by the Price Brothers, produced by Oink Inc. Radio, associate producer Tori Adams, and is recorded and produced at Baker Sound in Philadelphia.